right, so today we're going to be talking about millennials. I've been here for about an hour and a half, been floating in the back, and I've heard that word a lot. Millennials. How do we market to millennials? How do we advertise to millennials? How do we work with millennials? We're going to be talking about all of that today. I'm going to lay out some plans, some ideas that hopefully you can take back to your business and begin to initiate immediately to see some change. So let's begin. The evolving millennial consumer. Okay, to understand millennials, you have to understand them in the context of other generations, because it starts to make more sense. You see, when people think about millennials, they focus on the statistics, they focus on the what, they focus on the how. That's all good, and we're going to touch on that. But the real meat of the puzzle is the why. Why are millennials the way they are? And if you understand that, if you understand the why, then you know how to make smarter choices. So let's put it in context. In 1905, we see the rise of the GI generation. Now, a lot of people know this generation as the greatest generation, which actually Tom Brokaw made up. That was his name that he gave them. But we see a real optimism there, right? This is the turn of the century. We see a lot of pride in America. We see uniformity. We see formality. And for the first time ever, the idea of the quote-unquote teenager arises. There was no word for a teenager before this era. Before this, there were children and there were adults. And you talked about children, and you talked about adults, and this little group in between, 13 to 20, had no name. And we start to think about, how are teenagers buying? How are teenagers thinking? What does a teenager's mentality mean for us as consumers, as business owners, as a society? The rise of the teenager happens in this generation. Next, we see the silent generation. The silent generation saw war. They saw the Great Depression. The optimism that was there before begins to, it doesn't die, but it slowly tapers off. And we see a more serious generation. And all of a sudden, this teenager, this boost of information that was coming out about the teenager starts to go away, and children should be seen and not heard. And it dies for a little bit, and it's quiet. And then we see the baby boomers. How many people here are baby boomers? Raise your hand. All right, a lot of baby boomers here. I'm going to talk to you about your generation. You tell me if I'm wrong. You're the baby boomers, not me. All right, so baby boomers, right? This is really interesting because we see, for the first time ever, a true independence. They want to control their own destiny. As they get older, we start to see health and wellness become more important, right? We start to see them becoming more entrepreneurial, creating their own opportunities. This is a generation that evolves so much from the 20s into the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And what we see is a lesson for all generations. And the lesson is this: we cannot judge a generation while they're still in their infancy. Although today I'm going to talk to you about millennials, and there's a lot of research and a lot of data to support what I'm going to say, we're only in our 20s and early 30s, right? So what does that mean? That means just like your generation, we are going to evolve. And what's true today is true today, but it may not be true in 10 years. When we're looking at Gen X, we see a very different generation than the baby boomers and the millennials. And if you start to notice a trend, what you'll see is GI, optimistic, silent, a little more pessimistic, a little quieter, a little more cautious. Baby boomers, independent, optimistic. Gen X, a little quieter. This is one of the smallest generations, one of the smallest consumer segments, and they feel lost. You'll find that there isn't really a through line, and they know that, and maybe how they're defined is the fact that there isn't really a through line. And they feel sort of upstaged. They feel upstaged from the baby boomers, and they feel upstaged from my generation, the millennials. Millennials are the real segment that people are going after, and there's a reason why. 80 million members strong, the largest generation in human history. So let's define, so we're all on the same page, who they are. Born between about 1980 and 1996, between 18 and 34 years old. You can find some stuff that says 79, you can find some stuff that says 82. The most diverse generation in American history. 42% or so of American millennials are non-white. This is very new, right? This generation is more comfortable with diversity, is more open to conversations around diversity than any other generation so far. We're a generation that was raised on computers and technology. We're going to talk a lot about that, but this is crucial to understand. Information and technology, they used to be scarce. Whoever had the information had the power. No longer. Right? One of my first memories, actually, is I must have been 6 years old. I was in first grade, and the first time that I walked into my school's library, the very first time I'm walking in, they're carrying the card catalogs out. If that's not a symbol for what was to come, and computers were coming in. In fact, I don't have a single memory in my brain of not having a computer or some kind of technology in my life. And this is really, really crucial when we talk about the why in just a moment. The most educated and the most underemployed generation. Now, this statistic isn't particularly fair because, like I said, we're still somewhat in our infancy. But it's important to know we're spending more money on education, we're graduating, we're not finding jobs. And if we are finding jobs, a lot of the time we're finding jobs that don't pay enough to pay back those student loans. Big problem. It's also an opportunity. Politically agnostic and generally disconnected. You're about to see a conversation that happens about the election, about who's going to be the next president. And I guarantee you one of the first things you'll hear is millennials don't vote. Millennials are apathetic. Millennials don't care. Only one of those things are true. Millennials don't vote. But it's not because they're apathetic. And it's not because they don't care. It's because they're disconnected. They feel like the system does not respect who they are and how they live, and they feel like the candidates are fake, and they're not authentic no matter what side they're on. And because of that, we see a disconnection. And as business owners and as business people, we can learn from that. Because when we look at that and we see how they handle disconnection on a political level, we see how they handle disconnection on a consumer level. It's the same thing. We have to connect and we have to get on their page. And finally, they're deeply entrepreneurial. And what's interesting is when you talk to this generation about entrepreneurship, they don't necessarily define it as starting a business. They define it as a certain set of skills, beliefs, ideologies, how they operate in the world. How many millennials do I have here? Who am I talking about? All right, a good amount. Yell out if I'm wrong. It's okay, we can fight. I'm a good debater. Deeply entrepreneurial. They want to take initiative. They want to be invested, right? And whether they have their own company or they work for a company, they feel as though being entrepreneurial is a crucial skill and something that they want to learn and improve upon. But what I promised you we would talk about is why. Why are millennials the way they are? There are three things. Three things that have made this generation grow into the kind of consumers and the kind of people they are. The first thing is information, technology, and how that has shaped advertising. So today, in 2010, this statistic was from, the average consumer sees 5,000 messages every day. 5,000 messages. Now, in 1975, that was 500. That number has grown so much over the last 20 or 30 years that this is a generation that was raised on clever marketing, advertising, brand messages, everywhere we go, on our tablet, on our phone, on our computer. If we listen to the radio, on the radio. Messaging is everywhere. So what we saw was from let's say 08 to 1982, what do we see? We see television, we see radio, the rise of the infomercial, direct mail, right? These are definitely innovative ideas, innovative technologies over the course of 100 years. But what happened in the last 15 is mind-blowing. All of a sudden, in about 15, 17 years, the landscape changed. And this changed our needs. This changed our expectations, what we expect from the world, what we expect from education, what we expect from businesses. A lot of people think that millennials are entitled. Some millennials are entitled. But for the most part, it's not an entitlement, it's an expectation because it's what we grew up on. That's what was given to us, and that's turned us into consumers who don't have a lot of patience. We have only children syndrome, and I can say that because I'm an only child. If you're not an only child, you can't say that. All right, so information, technology. The next thing, what was happening in the 90s? The new economy. Think about when we were growing up. So from 1972, 1992, the economy's, all right, not bad, not good. There's ups, there's downs. But all of a sudden, in 1995 to about 1999, huge growth. Right? We see growth up, we see inflation down, jobs are everywhere. There is this period of abundance, and this just so happens to be the period where we're growing up. And we're sold this story. And the story is that if you go to school, and you do well, you follow the rules, you go to college, you graduate, you get a job, life's good, you get the house, you get the kids, you get the car, no problem. And then all of a sudden, that changed. And it just happened when we were graduating. 2001, right? We see everything sort of disappear. We see the bubble break. 2 million jobs were lost that year. By 2009, 11% unemployment. This is the time when we are coming into our prime. And I'm not saying that we deserved any of this. I'm not saying that we were entitled to it. But I'm just saying we were told we were going to get it. We were told that if we followed this model, something would happen. So when we're overly cautious, when we're untrusting at times, it's not because we're untrusting people. It's because we grew up in a time that taught us to be, especially with big companies, a little untrusting. So that's the two things, right? Information, technology, the economy. Then there's a third thing. My favorite graphic, the helicopter parent. So what happens when you mix a lot of information, a lot of technology, constantly plugged in, 24-hour news cycles, now, buy now, with a lot of spare time? Income, disposable income, exuberance, right? What happens when a lot of people have a lot of time on their hands and a lot of information on their hands, and they can choose to interpret and act on that information however they want? And we see the rise of the helicopter parent. A lot has been written about the helicopter parent and how that's changed us as people and as consumers. You're right, we expect a trophy for 9th place, and that's terrible. That's terrible! You know what 9th place is called? Last, L-A-S-T. But we can't deny the past, we can't deny the reality of the past, and the reality of the past is that we were given trophies for 9th place all the time. We were taught that we were special and unique little snowflakes, that we're gonna grow up and we were all gonna be president, and we can do anything we want if we just believed we could. And I love the idea of mindset. I think you have to have a terrific mindset to succeed in this world, but that really isn't the case, right? We all know that. And so as we get older and as reality starts to set in, all of a sudden we say, this isn't what life's all about. And we see a consumer that's very different. This is a generation, as I just talked about, that's very connected. The majority will check their phone 43 times a day. I will check mine at least double that, in fact. No, I'm just kidding. If you're tweeting, I would. 87% use 2 to 3 technology devices every day. I was actually in a meeting with somebody recently that works at a huge media company. They said that number's up to 4. And often it's at the same time. Right? We are a very loyal generation. This is something important to know. Very, very loyal if you give us a good reason to be. 60% feel like they're loyal to the brands that they patron. 44% are willing to promote products or services on social. Now, not every generation would do that, but this is a generation that does feel loyal to the brands they believe in. You just have to get them to believe in you. We are collaborative. If you're going to be in the executive session that I'm doing in about an hour and a half, we're going to talk all about collaboration. And I'm actually bringing in millennials of all different ages to have sort of a roundtable discussion. So collaboration will be a big piece of this. But this is something that really matters to this generation. They ask their friends and family for help, for recommendations. They want people to be involved in their decision. Now, do they want the business to be involved? Maybe not. But they want their friends and families. And we'll talk about influencers in a bit. That matters too. And 42% are interested in helping brands develop product, right? They want to be involved. They want to co-collaborate. They want to be a part of the process. Incredibly social. Over 90% will log into a social network at least once in a day, and 66 follow brands that they love. Again, going back to that loyalty. They're mission-focused, and I know you're mission-focused too, so this is something to pay attention to. 80% say they will purchase from a company that they feel support a shared cause. 75% say companies should create economic value for society. This is a generation that does not believe that business is just about making money. Of course, business is about making money, but that's one piece of a much bigger puzzle. And this generation truly believes that, and they purchase that way. And they're adventurous. They love a good experience. 78% would rather spend money on experiences than on tangible products. 78%. And 72% say that they're going to spend more money on experiences in the future. And I see everyone here taking a picture of this slide. So at the end, I'm going to give you a URL. All you got to do is go to that URL, put in your email, and immediately you'll get this deck sent to you. And I don't share that email with anyone, of course. All right, so this is who we are. But act now. So what's happened is that what we're starting to see is a bifurcation of this generation. So everything I talked about before, it's all true, but in various degrees. We're seeing sort of the younger millennials, 18 to 25, and we're seeing sort of the older millennials, 26 to 33, 34. I showed this picture to my girlfriend last night, and she said, they put on some weight as they get older. I said, yeah, well, it's true. Life's tough, Anyway, so we're seeing two different kinds of millennials. The first kind of millennial that we're seeing, the younger millennial, let's call it, is different in some ways. They are hyper-focused on experience, fear of missing out. They're Instagramming everything. They're constantly trying to focus on what they don't call their personal brand, but their personal brand. We see them actually a little bit more conservative than the older generation, which is shocking because usually it's reversed, right? And this is a generation that tends to be, this part of the generation, tends to be a little bit more independent. So as I talked about before, with the first part of this generation, my people, we love collaboration. We love to ask our friends for reviews, for recommendations. So does the younger portion, but not as much. And as we develop as a generation, this is only going to become more distinct. We're only going to see more of a difference between this younger group and this older group. Because I don't know about the millennials in here. I'm 33 years old. If you compare me to a 22-year-old, I'm 30. Did I say I was 33? Whoa. That's not good. I'm 32. Wow. Usually goes the other way. Getting old. See what happens? Baby boomers feel me. I thought that joke would work. It didn't as well. Okay. Anyway, so I'm 32, right? If you try to compare me to a 22-year-old, you're going to look at two very different things. I'm thinking about family. I'm thinking about settling down. I'm thinking about my life in the 30s and 40s. The 20s, they're thinking a little bit about that stuff, but they're not as serious about it. So we have to acknowledge the two very different sides of millennials. But what they do have in common is this. They want a deeply authentic, 360-degree, excuse me for the buzzword, brand experience that anticipates our needs, respects our differences, and celebrates our individuality. This is so important. And a lot of people roll their eyes at millennials, and I feel you and I understand you. And as somebody who spends most of his life talking about millennials, I roll my eyes with you at times. But the fact is that this is the truth. And if you can embody this, if you can take this idea to your organization, you will do better with the younger generation. Okay, so what does this mean from a marketing perspective? It means that instead of just thinking about things as market share, we all know what market share is. How much of the market do you own? How much work have you put in to own a certain piece of a business or an industry, right? Everyone understands market share. Well, market share represents the past and it represents the current. How much work you did and how much work you're doing. What have you earned? But there's something completely different to look at as well. Mindshare. Mindshare is the future. Mindshare is, what is that emotional response? What is that, how do I feel when I think about your company, right? Are you popular? Am I aware of it? What is that deep sense that I get? It's not about how much of the market you own. It's about bigger things, thought leadership, right? It's about thinking about your business in more than just dollar and cents, the real personality behind your business. And when you plan your marketing, when you think about how you're spending, all of your spend has to fall between this idea of mind share and market share. And I'll give you an example of my own business and to help you contextualize it a little bit. So I do a lot of different things, right? Here I am speaking with you today. I consult, I coach, I train, I do a lot of broadcast stuff on like CNBC and all that, and I write, right? Now, half of my business makes me money, and it's great. And the other half of my business costs me money. It's also great, but it costs me money or it doesn't make me any money. But what it does do is it leads to my credibility, right? It adds to how people think about me, how people think about my brand, what kind of work I do. Now, if I don't have the mind share piece, my market share goes like this, right? And if I have too much of the mind share piece, I don't have time to do the stuff that earns me market share. And so I constantly have to play with the formula. And for me, it's about 60-40. It has to be 60 on one side, 40 on the other, 40 on one side, 60 on the other, or my business doesn't survive. And your business is very different, but it's still important to look at your marketing campaigns from these two different lenses. Is it a mind share or is it a market share play? You have to know the difference, and you have to respect each for what they bring to your business. So what's the framework for the future? I gave you all these challenges, I gave you all these statistics and all this information. What do we need to do, right? Number one, accept that communication is the new currency. So in the 90s, we see this focus on operational excellence, right? With Six Sigma. How can you drive productivity, bring costs down? This is all that the 90s were about, right? 2000, 2001, 2002, we start to see innovation. We hear this word all the time. Innovation creeps up. Technology, innovative ideas. My argument is that the next phase, the phase we are in now, is the age of communication. What you talk about, how you talk about it, where you talk about it, and why you talk about it is the most important thing. And if you can talk about it in a way that truly resonates, if you can talk about it in a way that can cut through all the other crap we see every day, you win. So it's worth thinking about that. It's worth thinking about how are you communicating what you do on a daily basis, not just to this generation, but to every generation. Overinvest in mobile solutions. You've heard about mobile a lot today. I'm sure you're going to hear more about mobile. Mobile matters. Mobile, people purchase on mobile. We stream on mobile. We think on mobile, and that's only going to continue. Mobile is on a rise, and I know there are many solutions out there already, but it's worth over-investing. It's worth staying in front of the curve and really trying to figure out what the next mobile innovation is. Next, reimagine offline activation, offline experience. Just because you invest in mobile, just because you invest in digital, does not mean you can forget about offline. Offline still matters. In some local areas, offline matters more. We talk about brick and mortar. Some millennials will say brick and mortar is the most important because I need to feel like when I need an answer solved, I don't want to just call, I want to show up. Look at the younger side of the millennials, they might say something different. No matter what you do, you have to understand that online is not an excuse to not have offline as well. Just like the 60-40 mindshare market share, you have to figure out a measurement of both of them and figure out how they come together to create an overall experience. Because you look at the data and you look at the statistics, and millennials want a seamless and simple user experience from start to finish. And that goes across online to offline as well. Identify and integrate the influencer. Ooh, the influencer, such a big deal. We talked about they value the opinions of their friends, of their family. They're incredible numbers to show you that if you can tap into who the influencers are in this community, you can do a lot more with your advertising and marketing. A great example, a new study that just came out, and again, if you subscribe to this deck and email me, I'll send you all the references to this. It's just boring to put them all in here. A new study that came out showed that for every $1 you spend on influencer marketing equals about $6.84 of earned media value. What does that mean? Young people are about 50 times, 50, more likely to buy from an influencer, from somebody they respect, than from a business. They trust the influencer. They're engaging with the influencer on a daily basis. And identifying who the top influencers are in your area, both local and on a larger scale, is an important part of reaching this consumer. Adopt a holistic approach to ROI. So from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, when we think about ROI, return on investment, we think, okay, what is this dollar buying me? What is this dollar buying me? I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. I think you have to look at the larger picture. You have to take a holistic approach because the fact of the matter is, just like what I talked about with mind share and market share, not everything measures up. You're going to have to invest in some things that you're never going to see a direct return on investment on. And nobody likes to hear that. And if you're not the boss, it's really hard to sell that to the boss. Have them call me. I'll say it again and again. You won't get in trouble. You won't get fired. Adopt a holistic approach. Because in this new age of business that we're in, it's not just about dollar equals dollar. So I want to show you two case studies, someone that's doing it right, someone that's doing it wrong. Again, I think context is everything, and I want to give you context to these ideas. Red Bull. Red Bull's doing it right, whether you agree or not with their product. You see how energized I am? I had like 7 backstage. I'm just kidding. I did have 1, though. Ooh. Could be worse. So, all right, so Red Bull. Red Bull has effectively won the millennial market. Not only have they won the millennial market, they have created an entirely new category. Name me an energy drink before Red Bull existed. Jolt Cola. That was it. And you had to go to like a specialty store to get it. I have a caffeine problem is what I'm saying. So they created a category and they won the millennials. Millennials buy more Red Bull than any other energy drink, and my guess is they always will. And why? They followed this, right? Accept that communication is the new currency. Do me a favor and Google Red Bull content marketing. This company has spent more money on content than any other company I know of. Smart content, interesting content, engaging content on platforms where millennials frequent. Content, content, content. That's how they communicate, and that's why they're doing so well, one of the reasons. Overinvest in mobile solutions, you see time and time again. Recently, they just launched 3 new flavors, right? They hadn't launched a new flavor for quite some time. How did they launch the new flavor? Did they buy traditional advertising? Did they, I don't know, radio, television, whatever? No. What they did was they partnered with Pandora, and they created 3 different, everyone knows Pandora, streaming music. They created 3 different stations. And so when you saw the ad for the 3 new flavors, you clicked one, and you got an entirely different experience than if you clicked the other one or the other flavor, right? It was music based on the flavor, based on the idea of the flavor. This is one of many campaigns they've done on mobile. They know that mobile is where they can first engage. Reimagine offline activation. They have a whole student brand ambassador program where they pay students very little money, give them unlimited product, and tell them to infiltrate their schools and show up at parties with tons of Red Bull, right? Offline activation like you've never seen it. Here's free product, here's some cash. This is why you have to love our company. Go out and spread the word. They've had that program for years, and it's been so successful. Identify and integrate the influencer. We see it again with athletes, with musicians. They have figured out who young people listen to, who millennials care about, and they work with these people as partners to continue the conversation and to create some real value and some real understanding around the brand, because they know that young people are not listening to the brand. They want to connect with the influencer. And adopt a holistic approach to ROI. I don't work for Red Bull, although it sounds like I might. I don't know how they approach ROI, but my guess is that they have a pretty interesting way of thinking about ROI, one that's worked for them. And I will say this, by the way, about the first one, the communication thing. They've created so much content over the years that they now have an entirely new, they have a media company. There's Red Bull and Red Bull Media. The media company now turns a profit. They've created so much content that their content's getting money back to the business. I mean, it's amazing what content can do. It's taken years, but it's amazing. And with 2 minutes remaining, McDonald's, not doing it well, not doing it well at all. In fact, look at all of these, they've done the opposite of what Red Bull has done. And it was so funny, I was using this example in a speech last week, and it was a room full of agencies, and I realized as I clicked the button that some of the agencies might work with McDonald's, and I said, oh, I'm about to show a slide of McDonald's. If you're the agency that works with them, you're doing it right. Everyone else is doing it. And in fact, there was an agency there that was their biggest client. They turned their computer, they put McDonald's on Skype. So I'm never going to work with McDonald's, is what I'm trying to say to you. They Skyped in the client live, and I just saw like a face on the computer, and I was like, oh God, I'm going to get sued. That's all right. I'm a millennial, I can handle it. 9th place. It'll all work out. All right. I have 1 minute. I got to get to this. Okay. Accept that communication's a new currency. They haven't, right? So let's take a look at how they're communicating on platforms. They recently did a whole post on Instagram that showed a fit young woman climbing up the stairs with a McDonald's in her hand. What were the comments by millennials who frequent that platform? Horrible. If you eat there, you're never going to look like that. Why would I ever purchase McDonald's? You should go read them. They're funny. Like, there's just more and more comments about, what did McDonald's do? Radio silence. Quiet. Worst thing you can do. Worst thing you can do is radio silence. What did I just say? This is a generation that demands communication. They demand connection, for better or worse. Radio silence. Missed opportunity. Overinvest in mobile solutions. Can you believe that they do not have a nationwide mobile app like Starbucks does yet? They will by the end of the year, but they don't have it yet. Weird. Reimagine offline activation, and I'm going to combine that with identify and integrate the influencer. They were just at South by Southwest this year, and they did something really interesting. I'm going to give them a little credit. They did a big event, and they asked the people in attendance to give them ideas about what they could do to pitch them, Shark Tank style, to pitch them on what they can do to create a better company, to create better marketing, That's huge steps for them, and I applaud them for that because they haven't done it thus far. And adopt a holistic approach to ROI, I doubt it. So what's my final message today with 10 seconds remaining? My final message is the rise of the empowered consumer, which is the millennials and beyond, began with this generation. It does not end there. Right? There are a lot of people that believe that all the things I'm talking about start and stop with millennials. They do not. This is the beginning of a new era of business. You're going to see this with Gen Z. You're going to see this with the generation after it. We have really turned a corner. Excuse the buzzword again, but a paradigm shift. Things are changing. And if you understand this and you accept it and you're okay with it and you bring it into your organization, you're going to have such a strong business. It's those that resist it that will be in trouble. So thank you so much for your time. You've been a great audience, and thanks for all the work you're doing.